Welcome to Gambling with an Edge. And now, here are Bob and Richard.
Good afternoon, and welcome to Gambling with an Edge. I'm Richard Munchkin.
And I'm Bob Dancer.
And today, the big news is, which I'm sure all of our listeners have heard about, that the Supreme Court, not today, but earlier, has overturned a law which outlawed sports gambling, and things are about to get crazy. Everyone is scrambling for a piece of a pie that'll be worth many billions of dollars, and as advantage gamblers, we want our share too. So today will be a slightly different type show, and these shows are some of my favorites. We have a roundtable discussion with some of the best sports bettors we know to discuss how we think this is all going to shake out and where are best opportunities for listeners who want to gamble with an edge. See how I did that? So today we have four guests, and they're all guests who've been on the show before, so you can go back and listen to older episodes that they've been on. They are Anthony Curtis, Frank B., Captain Jack, and Jacob, who is also sometimes known as Chairman. Gentlemen, welcome to Gambling with an Edge.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep. So before we get into that, there's one topic we want to cover first, which is the other big news. Tuesday, the Culinary Union voted that when their contract expires, the union negotiating committee is authorized to call a strike anytime after June 1st. Now, this does not mean that there's going to be a citywide strike, but it does give them leverage in the negotiations. Anthony, do you know anything about this?
Well, heck, yeah. I mean, this everybody's watching this real closely around Vegas. What makes this really interesting is that with the Vegas Golden Knights making the Stanley Cup Finals, this is going to give the union even more leverage to threaten here because, certainly you're talking about 34 resorts involved up and down the Strip in downtown. You're talking about between 50 and 100,000 workers. So, any sort of disruption like that, any sort of walkout is going to create a ridiculous disruption on the Strip. It's going to change the situation for anybody who's visiting, and certainly Vegas doesn't want that to happen while the Stanley Cup playoffs is going on. Their big opportunity to show off, could get a real black eye if this were to happen. So we're all paying a lot of attention to it.
And do you think it is something that will happen, or do you think it'll be avoided?
I think it'll be avoided. What this really boils down to is the last time there have been votes like this before to strike, to okay a strike, but the last time it really happened was 1984. When it happened at that time, it was something like a 67-day walkout. I guess I don't know how much money, $100 million was lost, estimated between on the worker side and on the casino side combined. And it was a horrible situation. So they're trying to avoid that. What I'm hearing from the inside is that it's not going to happen, that there's going to be a settlement, and that, this is all just a lot of saber rattling on the part of the union to make it happen and to make sure it happens. So if you're getting ready to come out on a vacation, the important thing to know is that the casinos will not close. They will. There might be certain restaurants that will shut down. There might be a couple of shows that will shut down, whatever it takes for them to keep things going. But they would bring in replacement workers, and the places would stay open for sure.
Yeah, that would really be a mess. I'm sure they'll do everything they can to avoid that.
The biggest concern for people who would want to come out here for a vacation experience is that some of the places they would want to go to, especially when it comes to food, might not be operating. And if they decide to stage pickets, then that can be disconcerting if you've got to cross a picket line, whether you like to support unions and you don't want to cross lines or whether you don't care at all. Nobody likes to walk into a place on their vacation and get yelled at. So that's really what would happen, and that's about as bad as it would be, though, especially in the early stages.
Okay, before we get started, I want to mention one other thing, and that is there are 6 of us on this show, and we are all in different locations. So we're going to do the best we can to not talk over each other, but we don't have any visual cues. So with that being said, let's get on to the sports betting. And the thing that I want to start with first is something I find laughable, which is that the leagues now want a piece of the pie, and they are calling it an integrity fee. One senator from New Jersey just called it extortion. So do you think that the leagues will end up with some sort of payoff? Captain Jack, you want to start?
Sure. This integrity fee debate has really gone on for a while now, and it started with the leagues originally, making it the mountain they wish to die on for this entire sports betting debate. They wanted to say, well, legalized betting would harm the integrity of their sport. So once the handwriting was on the wall that they were going to lose the court case ultimately, they started to shift their focus, and they said, well, how about if we protect the integrity of the game, if you give us a fee, a 1% of handle, they recommended, we can protect the integrity of the sport. Well, 1% of handle of something that, by all estimates is roughly $300 billion of industry in the United States alone is ridiculous. The sports leagues don't need $3 billion a year to protect the integrity of the game, especially when the integrity of the game is protected largely by the bookmakers. The bookmakers probably have the largest vested interest in protecting integrity. They take the worst of it if there was any kind of match fixing or point shaving. So for the leagues to first of all recommend that they needed to be in the integrity of the game was laughable. But then to recommend that it was 1% of handle was the fee they needed when in an industry that has a low margin to begin with. Sports betting, I believe they average about 4 to 5% of handle is their gross revenue. So 1% of handle would equal about 20 to 25% of the total revenue that the sports books would make. That's just unreasonable. That would result in probably some bad lines being offered to consumers. The fees would be passed on to the consumers, and we would see, minus 115 instead of minus 110, or moreover, we probably see things like parlay odds being shorted more than they already have been, because that would be a little less transparent to the consumer. So then, after the integrity fee, after that whole word started to be a bad phrase for the leagues, they switched their focus, and now they're saying, well, we deserve a royalty because you're using our brand. We're the sport that your bet is based upon, so therefore we deserve a royalty of the action. And that's just as laughable. I mean, that's like, for instance, if Bob and Richard decided to have a backgammon competition to determine who's the best backgammon champion on Gambling with an Edge, and independent of that, Anthony and I said, well, I'm going to put a wager on Bob, and Anthony said, I'm going to put a wager on Richard. Bob and Richard aren't entitled to a piece of our bet.
Why not?
But their competition is distinct and independent from our wager, and that's what the position the leagues are in now. They don't deserve a piece of the action, especially after all these lawsuits have gone.
Yeah, this is Anthony here. I'll jump in real quick. I've been following this as well, and I agree with everything that Captain Jack says. I mean, all of his rationale is right on. Finally, in the beginning, everybody kind of shrugged. By everybody, I mean the states and the lawmakers and all went, well, that sounds reasonable, because they didn't understand. They really didn't get the math. This is going to be one of the biggest problems going forward with legalized gambling of any sort, let alone sports, is that the people who are making the laws are not gamblers. They don't understand how the industry works, and they can be Pied Pipered into some strange deals. Well, enough of this has been out. Everybody's writing about it. Everybody's commenting on it, and they're starting to wise up. And the more I read, I'm reading a defiance on the part of the states. Today, the most recent one out of New Jersey, I think it was, is it Lesniak? Is that the name? I think he said, New Jersey will not pay one dime of, quote, tribute, to the leagues. So I think this is something that's going to die on the vine pretty quickly. You might get one or two, squares, if you want to call them that, of the states that will do it, but I think that most of them are going to tell them to take a hike.
Well, I can't imagine that some states are going to say no and other states are suddenly going to bend. I mean, do the leagues have any leverage at all?
No, they don't. But that can happen. What you just said, the way I read it and understand it, and any of you who might know this better than me can correct me. But what the Supreme Court ruled on was that the states, as of now, have the right to do it the way they want to do it. So it is up to each one individually with their own legislation to decide, do they want to pay these fees or do they not?
Isn't there?
Yeah,
Isn't there already isn't there already an integrity fee in New York State? In which case, it'll be ended, or it's been negotiated and they have to keep it and compete against all the states who don't have it.
Right. So New York State has a bill currently in their legislature that has an integrity fee built in. It's 0.25% of handle, capped at 2% of revenue. It's a little bit more palatable in terms to both to the sports books as well as to the consumer. For instance, Nevada has an excise tax on handle that's built in at 0.25% as well. That's a federal excise tax on Nevada wagering. So there is precedence to having something that's associated with handle, and there is precedence of it being a low amount like 0.25%. And a lot of people think that that's actually what the leagues were targeting. They use the negotiating tactic of set the bar high and then lower it down in negotiation. But so far, New York is the only one that seems to be bending towards what the leagues have been saying. But that New York bill is not quite final yet, and there are some amendments they're looking to pass through before they vote on it. But they're running out of time to vote on it. Their legislative session ends in a couple weeks here.
I would say, like, the leagues maybe only leverage. You could see different states. So, like, New York has so many franchises and the potential to host a big event, whereas a state like Kansas is, of course, never going to have a professional team or a big event. So they don't have as much leverage over a Kansas as, like, we won't give you a Super Bowl or any other marquee neutral site event that they control if you're in one of those big states. So that would be something that they could try to do to force somebody with leverage at this point.
Okay, so that was Jake. And Jake, you feel that this is not going to be good for the advantage players. Why is that?
I think the story is yet to be told. It's interesting because, there's not like a multi-billion-dollar industry built on roulette or Keno, like games that everybody knows are unbeatable or perceived to be. Nobody cares. And, like, part of the reason it's going to be so big is, like, the mystique of the winning syndicates, big money players and all this that gets put out there. And so you have, like, this kind of triforce of incestuous bullshit from the casinos that every week during the football season, they complain they barely won. Like, if the Patriots covered, we got beaten by the public. If the Patriots don't cover, we got beaten by the Sharps. And then the report comes out that, like, they had a record-setting month, year, every single time. So it's in their best interest to promote that they have such a, they're so easily beatable because, of course, they want everybody to flock to the game. Whereas it's in the media's best interest to publish those pieces like ESPN Chalk, which was a niche product that probably was low on their totem pole, is now going to be one of their probably more prestigious departments. That's ESPN Chalk would be like ESPN sports gambling coverage. And so, of course, they want that access. They're going to just mindlessly parrot those same talking points that they're getting from the books about the big syndicates and all the winners and all the public winning, just everybody winning. So they mindlessly publish that same stuff. And then you have that third leg where it's like, well, the real pros aren't going public and talking about it. So then you have the tout industry that comes in and claims to be the winners. And, come to my site. I've got a stable of pro bettors. And then the media will promote them. And they all work hand in hand with the books and the kickbacks. And the people that aren't guaranteed. So I mean, that industry, that peripheral sports betting industry, of course, is going to explode. But the people who are already winning, like, they're not doing it at legal sports books. You don't go to Caesar's Palace and bet $50,000 on a basketball game or something. It just doesn't happen. So you have to build out these networks, of your offshore contacts, your bookies, things like that. And the problem could be, stories to be told. But if the deli in New York that, takes 2,000 or 5,000 or whatever now, it's all a zero-sum game. Like, the reason they might take a sharp bet is because there's so much money in a place like New York that it doesn't matter. Well, if it's going to be so much more convenient for your everyday gambler to just go down to the William Hill kiosk and place a bet, that market dries up. And, it's not going to benefit an existing working advantage player to have more William Hills and more Cantors and more outlets that are just hubbed here in Nevada. Like Borgata being an MGM hub just gains nothing.
But if every state can do what they want, isn't there the possibility that there are new people getting into the business and not all of them maybe are going to be sharp?
Yes, definitely. Maybe I'm not as optimistic as some. I for the same reason that Hard Rock and Silver Sevens don't have the economy of scale to operate their own book, and it makes more sense to lease that space. Why is, Canterbury Park in Minneapolis going to operate their own sports book instead of, William Hill will be there with a bag of money to lease space from them. Some places will probably do it, and they may or may not be sharp. It's a story that remains to be untold. I'm not convinced that advantage players are the big winners. It may be great. I can't say it's not, but I can say Touts, ESPN, the Action Network, like those media peripherals, and of course the sports betting bookies themselves are going to make money hand over fist. And the one group I don't see getting a proportionate piece of this billion-dollar pie is originating advantage players, which is kind of ironic.
Well, this is Anthony. This is Anthony. I was going to just throw it to Frank. I was going to say these are things that he and I have talked about ever since this stuff started coming down the pike. And I think the gist of our discussions has kind of been twofold. One is it'll depend on how many more independents there will be. As Jake just said, you don't want to see a William Hill on every corner. That's just not going to do it. More independents might be good for good players. And then probably having the same tool set that you have now, the same toolbox with outs in other places that are supposed to be erased by this, would make a difference. But I think Frank could probably comment on this.
Yeah, it's just like Chairman said. I believe it's going to be, is there going to be diversity or not as far as the books out there? It's just going to be the same lineup of books that we get in Nevada, just available in other states. It's not going to be that big a deal, for guys within the state, but also for people looking for weak operators. And to get involved for a new operator is going to require them to abide by whatever fees, taxes, regulations, all that kind of stuff that's going to be set up differently in each state. Are they able to fade that, or does it take a big operation to get going, to fade that overhead that gets for the startup costs? So, that's the big question, and that's why I'm taking, a wait, examine, and react approach to things. We have to wait and see what happens, because, you could have William Hill on every corner, and that's a real possibility because, the overhead costs.
So what do you think is the order? What Captain Jack, I think you're up on this a lot. The order of what states are coming first, and how soon are we going to see it?
Right. So we have there are currently a few states that have already passed laws that said if the Supreme Court should ever strike down or Congress should repeal PASPA, then sports wagering is legal in our state, and we can offer it under our own regulations. And New Jersey, ironically, New Jersey was one of the first to have a law. They repealed that law in order to kind of get back in the fight after losing the first round of court fight about 4 years ago. And they went with this, sports gambling is not illegal when they took it back to the Supreme Court. So now that they've got the Supreme Court to repeal PASPA, they actually need to get a law going, because right now they don't have a law, and basically anyone could be a sports book in New Jersey if they operated in a casino or a racetrack. So they're scrambling to create this law, and they've actually put a provision in the bill for this new law that if you jump the gun and offer sports wagering in New Jersey, you have to wait 5 years to offer it again before this law. So they've kind of covered their base there. But it looks like their current law, they're looking to vote on it on June 7th. There's currently 2 bills, one in the Assembly, one in the Senate, and they differ very slightly, but in kind of unique ways. For instance, the Assembly bill says all casinos, all racetracks, all sites that previously had a racetrack within the last 15 years before we first talked about sports wagering, which for them is 2012, so going back to the mid-90s. If you offered a racetrack within that time period, you can have sports betting, even though some of those racetracks have been demolished and are now shopping malls. But they can open up a sports betting restaurant or lounge, as they call it, right there in suburbia. Anyway, the Assembly bill says that you can have the sports wagering and you can have one online partner, and that online partner has to be the same brand as your casino or racetrack. The Senate version says you can have 2 online partners, and they don't need to be the same brand. So there's a ways this can go, and one of the more encouraging things as an AP is there are currently 5 casino companies operating in AC: Caesars, MGM, Golden Nugget, Tropicana, and Resorts. There's 2 more coming in June. Hard Rock is going to open up where the Trump Taj Mahal used to be, and the Ocean Resort is going to open up where Revel used to be. So we'll have 7 companies there in Atlantic City. There are currently 3 racetracks, but if you take the letter of the law, there could be as many as 5 racetracks. So now that's 12 different companies that can offer sports betting in New Jersey. Under the one version of the bill, that's 12 possible competing sports books. Under the other version of the bill, that's over 20. That's like 24 competing sports books possible in New Jersey. So there's definitely a possibility that things can bloom to the point where there'll be enough competition and enough variety and enough liquidity that it'll be even beneficial to an AP. But even beyond New Jersey, we have other states that have already enacted laws, and kind of chief among them is Delaware. Delaware has had parlay betting on the NFL for the past 10 years, since 2009, and they had their attorney general look at the law and say, do we need any changes to this law, or are we good to go? And the attorney general in Delaware has said, you're good to go. You can start taking sports wagers as soon as you can. So Delaware is actually, though, one of those places where the outlook is a little more bleak for the advantage player, because Delaware is a shop where there is a William Hill kiosk on every corner. The Delaware concession is owned strictly by the lottery, and the lottery has basically then outsourced the risk management to William Hill. So if you go to a Delaware casino during NFL season and you attempt to make a sports parlay wager, and you have 3 teams on there that the lines have moved, and you have a big edge, you're likely to get that wager rejected by them because they just don't want winners. Now with single game wagering, we'll see what happens, but Delaware will probably start to offer it at their 3 casinos, which are Harrington Raceway, Dover Downs, and Delaware Park. And they'll also still be risk managed by William Hill, operating out of Nevada. And the unfortunate part is that the Delaware Lottery isn't experienced in losing. In fact, they don't want to lose. I've been told in the past that they don't think they should ever have a losing day. So they're probably going to be managed in terms of their risk similar to that, where they don't want to take action from sharp bettors or from winners. But that remains to be seen. We'll see what happens. Maybe the liquidity will be so great that they can allow some sharp bets in there to balance their books and things like that.
I have a question pertaining to what you said about rejecting wagers. William Hill here is that they'll cut off your account. So New Jersey and Missouri have still, I believe, the no barring statutes. What do you think the impact is as it pertains to sports? Like, they can't refuse a blackjack bet because you're an AP. Do you think that carries over to sports? How does that work in your mind?
That's a good point. There's a good chance that, well, first of all, I've read through the bills that are before the New Jersey legislature, and none of them deal with the ability to back off players unless you're in the excluded persons list or you're, work for a team or work for a casino. So there's nothing in there that says, they have the right to ban sharp players. One of the major misconceptions of the Houston versus Resorts case is that it's not so much that casinos aren't allowed to ban winning players or players that are based on skill. It's that the sole right to ban players lies with the Casino Control Commission. So in other words, they could back off counters if they were to be able to convince the Casino Control Commission to do it for them. So the missing wild card we have with New Jersey so far is they have not released the regulations that the Department of Gaming Enforcement, which is the division of the New Jersey State Police that has kind of taken the place of the New Jersey Casino Control Commission. They have not released their regulations yet, and it'll be interesting to see if in the regulations there's a line in there saying they reserve the whole exclusive right to ban players, or if they give that right to casinos.
Well, the other question. The other question. Go ahead, Frank. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, even if they can't ban you, they'll figure out a way to handcuff you, just like they do everywhere else. Just like they do in Jersey. They have tactics that they handle guys at the blackjack tables with. You put a sign up that says 25 max, and then they point to 4 of the 5 players and say, you all can exceed the limit, and this guy over here cannot. Captain Jack can't. And there'll be a way to, you'll get reduced limits. You'll get, certain options taken away from you. Being barred is about the equivalent of that.
Yeah, I agree. Although, I think that some press could definitely be generated about this topic in those states, and it wouldn't be good for the sports books, but ultimately I don't think it's going to make any difference.
Well, this is where you have to pierce that veil that I said earlier, where they all work hand in hand. I've seen, you'll see Cantor claim they took a $100,000 bet on whatever, and then on Twitter you'll see somebody respond right to it with, here's a video or a screen cap of a $1,000 bet rejected. And I think any pro here in town has been there and knows they do this. And the guy who writes the ESPN articles literally said, it's not news to anybody that sportsbooks will decline a wager. I just don't see a market for that kind of reporting, which of course, he's lying. He's protecting it's not in his best interest to bite the hand that feeds him. He doesn't care about the 5 guys that get bets rejected. He cares about the info he's getting from and the quotes he's getting from them. But I wish he would just come out and say, I'm not going to report it because it's not my best interest, instead of these lame excuses. And I don't know how it's going to carry over into other markets. Maybe a local angle, the Philadelphia paper might be interested in an Atlantic City expose if they do something like that. But the existing market, that just hasn't happened, and it's really sad.
I'm reminded of when the laws outlawing computers in casinos were up for debate in New Jersey, and some of the guys did some actual lobbying and, spending $5,000 on dinners for Congress people, for their campaign, and did some lobbying, and they actually were able to delay the bill in New Jersey for a couple of years for not a lot of money. So, yes, it would not be impossible to find Congress people that are sympathetic to the sharp player.
This is Anthony. I would add to that the thing I keep hearing the most about all of this, of every aspect of this, is we're not sure. Whenever I've asked a direct question or I've heard somebody on the news ask a direct question, it's we're not sure yet. And I think that's basically the rule right now, is that nobody really knows what they're getting into, and nobody knows how situations are going to be handled. And obviously we're here talking today and we're speculating about it, but it's anything can happen as long as there's not a federal code that governs everything, and you've got ostensibly, potentially 50 different states. We all know that's not really true. I mean, we're not going to get it in Utah, and we're probably not going to get it in Hawaii just because of the way they are and some other places. But let's say 40 to 45 different states that can have their different laws and policies. It all remains to be seen.
Yeah, and that's a good point, Anthony. This is Captain Jack again. That's a good point in that there's going to be some states that really screw this up. I mean, there's going to be states that view this as the great savior to a budget gap. We've already kind of seen that with Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania passed a sweeping gambling expansion. They're going to have gambling in airports and in truck stops and everywhere they can. And because so far the Pennsylvania gambling story has been a huge success. They're now the number 2 jurisdiction in the country behind Nevada. But they decided that they had a budget gap, and so last summer they passed a gambling expansion that basically permitted sports wagering if PASPA should fall. But in doing so, they set a 34% tax rate on revenue and a $10 million licensing fee paid annually. That's ridiculous. That basically says, maybe William Hill can get in there, with their bags of money. But the little guys aren't going to go into Pennsylvania, and William Hill might go in and then they'll lobby the law to get it changed to be more suitable to them, but probably create something in there to give them more leverage in the state, because there's going to be states that have insane tax rates, and with this being a low margin industry, sports betting won't be able to bear it, and it'll be passed on to the consumer for a large part. West Virginia is another one that they have a sports betting law, but they also have a 35 to 49% tax rate for casino revenue. Sports betting can't succeed in West Virginia given those tax rates.
So when casinos change management or new casinos open, they often give away too much in promotions. Are any of you planning to fly to whatever state opens when they open and see what kind of bonuses they're giving?
Yeah, I mean, it's Captain Jack again. I'll be there on opening day in New Jersey. I live in New Jersey. I've disclosed that before on this podcast. Opening day in New Jersey is going to be at Monmouth Park because they kind of have been the poster child for this whole fight. Monmouth Park is a rinky-dink little racetrack located on the coast in the northern part of the state. But I'll go up there for the show and to see what happens. I plan to be checking out all the sports books in New Jersey. I'll be at opening day in Delaware. If that comes before or after opening day in New Jersey, I'll still drive there and check it all out and see what happens. Will there be a lot of bonuses or a lot of new player signups? I don't know. We didn't really see that in Nevada with the mobile betting market. They haven't really offered anything to get you to sign up for the mobile apps. The liquidity drove there pretty quick because it's the convenience factor. But I definitely tend to keep an eye on these other states and see what happens because we're going to see a lot of new players. Churchill Downs, the Kentucky-based racetrack operator, they partnered with the Golden Nugget in Atlantic City already. Churchill Downs has never offered sports betting, but they jumped right in there and became Golden Nugget's online partner. They may be Golden Nugget's only online partner if we go with the assembly version of the bill in New Jersey, and that would lock out Golden Nugget's other online casino partner, which is Paddy Power Betfair, who is the second largest bookmaking company in the UK. So, it'll be interesting to see if we have other ones like that. There's a couple others that are changes that are rumored to be happening. DraftKings has already put up billboards in New Jersey saying they're in on this. They're going to be offering sports betting in the state. We don't know who they're partnering with yet, but they're going to be in on it. FanDuel wants in on this as sports betting. So there's going to be a lot of people operating sports betting that either haven't done so before or are coming from a different angle or might be adding some variety into the whole mix for new players.
Well, FanDuel was just bought by Paddy Power, right?
Correct. Yes. They do plan to operate the brand independently, though, so it'll still be FanDuel in the U.S. Well, I mean, Betfair already operates in New Jersey. They even operate a horse betting exchange in New Jersey. So they have plenty of footprint here and brand recognition, but they're still going to use FanDuel as well.
Frank, were you trying to say something?
No, I was just going to say exactly what you said. I think FanDuel sometime this week is being acquired by Paddy Power Betfair.
Now, does this law allow for online poker?
For online poker or for online sports betting?
No, I know it does for online sports betting, but does that include online poker, and will it include online gambling?
Well, New Jersey already has online gambling and online poker in a regulated environment. I believe Nevada has online poker, Delaware has online poker, and recently they've been able to finally create multi-state compacts. So technically I could play against someone in Las Vegas if I play here in New Jersey online and they play in Nevada online. We could sit at the same table and play against each other. Interstate gambling between two consenting states where they have legalized it does not violate the Wire Act of 1961. So not only does this provide for online poker in these states, but it could provide for online sports betting as well, and the sharing of liquidity pools between states that would consent. That's something that's probably another mile or two down the road, but that could be an interesting development.
Are any of the states looking to do what New Jersey has done and add the online gambling to this?
Pennsylvania has it in their gambling expansion bill, but again, they have a high tax rate associated with it. But with casino gambling and even with poker, they can associate a higher tax rate with it because there's a higher hold percentage on those games and poker rake, and so they can kind of get away with that. There are a couple other states that have online gambling bills in the works. None of them have been signed into law yet, and I know in a couple cases they do plan to kind of add in sports wagering in there as well. And a lot of states that did laws to regulate DFS kind of threw in a line about sports betting in there as well. Mississippi is a good example. They basically, in legalizing DFS, they put in a line that says, it's not prohibited to wager on sports at a Mississippi casino. So technically they could start taking bets now. But of course, once this Supreme Court ruling came down, a lot of these legislature types in these states instantly saw the money grab in their head and said, oh, wait a minute, we need to talk about licensing fees and we need to talk about tax rates and things like that. So, it's just another hand in the pot. The states are going to look to make money off of this. And they will make money, but they better be realistic in how they think that sports betting can change their fortunes.
I have a question for Anthony. Is there any thought or insight as far as the expansion would affect Nevada individually? Is there enough? Are they fretting losing handle? Or I don't think so. I don't feel like enough people come here specifically for it, and the big events are still events. But I'm not sure how maybe they view it themselves.
Well, kind of on the fringes, people who are talking about it are saying, well, this has to be a negative for Nevada. The people who are less vocal, the people in the industry that are less vocal and that understand it more this does not ruffle their feathers one iota. First of all, as you just mentioned, sports betting is such a small piece of the pie here. I think it's 2%, 2.5%, something along those lines in terms of the total gambling take. Second is that a lot of these places here feel they're going to expand to these other states. We've been saying Will Hill, but there's a lot of other entities here that feel, Boyd and so forth, that feel that they can expand their operations. And then there's the same argument that we had 20, 25 years ago when widespread gambling, took hold, starting in riverboats and then in casinos, being that it's still second grade compared to what you can get in Las Vegas. So big events like March Madness and the Super Bowl will not be hurt as even more people want to bet sports and will want to come to the big show.
Yeah, I would agree with most of that. I have no doubt like the Comp Boyd would certainly be a big winner because they have a nationwide footprint of smaller casinos that they'll probably operate their own book. I guess I would be more concerned for like a ticket writer or, the small periphery of people who are on the lower levels of like an individual book. But like you said, I don't think it's actually going to be a big deal, but those would be the people I would expect to be most nervous.
Well, think about it. It would to be really badly affected, it would mean that people who were coming here specifically to bet sports were not going to come here anymore because they're going to bet sports in their own places. And I don't think, and I think the people who, oversee Vegas's success feel that there are that many of those, and those that are going to be replaced by new people who learn how to bet sports. I've got, with our publishing business, we have 9 books on sports in production right now because we feel that people are going to want to learn. They're going to want to learn how to do it, not just strategies. I mean, the biggest book that we foresee is being written by Blair Rodman, who wrote Kill Phil, which is a beginner strategy on how to play poker tournaments. And Blair is also very adept at betting sports, has for years, and he's betting essentially a how-to book with a little bit of basic strategy in it, but basically this is how you do it. And we feel that there's going to be a gigantic market of people who want to do this thing. I've done on some of the national, not as big as Gambling with an Edge podcast, mind you, but some of the national shows I've done, they've asked me about sports betting and what it really is, and I said it's an incredibly exhilarating form of entertainment that you can do for really low amounts of money. And then when people get their teeth into this and see how much fun it really is, it's going to take off. But in order for them to do it, they've got to learn how to play it. And I think that enough new customers will be made to cover anything that's lost because of expansion in this way.
Oh, that's a great point. Yeah, like people who are maybe overwhelmed by the atmosphere of the big board who have never placed a bet, if they have that experience at home, will now be more likely to spend in the sports book here, which would replace it. Yeah, I think it's good.
Well, see, we tend to all of us, like the guys here on this roundtable, we have small universe disease, and we talk in a way because we walk into a sports book or we go online and we're looking at numbers, and it's so second nature to us, and we don't even think about until you have a friend come with you and go, what does that mean when they point up to, they're looking at the biggest game of the year at the Super Bowl, and they go, what does that mean? And they're looking at, all they're doing is looking at a money line or the point spread, and they don't understand it. So we take a little bit too much for granted. And what this is going to do is it's going to grow the betting universe for sure.
We need to take a brief pause for some commercials. Bob, do you want to take it away?
I do. The South Point has more than 10,000 games, returning more than 99%. This is more than anyone else has. The kiosk spin ends today when the game is being aired. So if you've earned food vouchers, they must be redeemed by Sunday, June 3rd, or they evaporate. If you've earned resort card vouchers, they must be redeemed at the club booth by midnight, Sunday, June 3rd, or they will expire. Once you have the resort crowds, they do not expire. Monday, May 28th, Memorial Day, they have a hot seat promotion where every 3 minutes somebody gets $100. All you have to do is be playing at your card. At the VideoPoker.com is the best place to play lots of games. If you sign up for gold membership, $8.95 a month or $79.95 a year, this allows you to get corrections on most of the games. The game of the week is Triple Play Dream Card. This is a 10 coin per line game, and periodically you get a dream card, which means the card is turned into the best available card before the draw. If you don't think it's right, the best available card, which does sometimes happen, you have the right to change it. You need no special strategy to learn this game. To play this game, it's the same strategy as the base game, and it is always positive EV to play the dream card version compared to the regular version. Continuing with our sports topic, in the original ruling by Judge, it said Congress can make laws regulating sports betting at the national level rather than leaving it all to the states. Do any of you see this as happening or potentially happening?
I'll go first here, Captain Jack again. So yes, Justice Alito basically said Congress is free to make a law regarding sports wagering. Just the way they did it in 1992 was unconstitutional. If they were to do it again, they need to have a federal oversight of the sports betting industry. So immediately the leagues kind of shifted their focus and they said, well, if we're not able to get our integrity fee here in all these states, why don't we just focus on Congress, where we just have to get 51 senators to agree to this rather than 50 different states. And they put their focus there. And I think Orrin Hatch came out with, he's in support of the federal framework for sports betting. But here's the thing. Gambling, and Anthony knows this as well from watching this industry for so long, gambling is a bit of a divisive issue for congressmen. It's too much of a hot potato, and nobody ever wants to touch it in an election year. And 2018 is an election year, the midterms. So no one's going to touch it this year. 2019, we're going to have probably a large turnover in Congress. It's probably not going to be enough of a big issue for them to tackle it. 2020 is another election year. It's a presidential election year. So now we're up to 2021, and the odd-numbered years are probably a better chance than the even-numbered years. And so we're talking 3 to 5 years out before Congress enacts this. Now, in the meantime, the states are free to do as they choose, and we're going to see, at least 24 states pass sports betting regulation. But a congressional law will supersede a federal law. And as a result, this could change everything. It could change New Jersey, it could change Delaware, it could change Nevada. So it's kind of important that, people focus on their state laws first to get them in the books, and then worry about the congressional law later, the federal law. Because there's always a chance, just like we saw with the Unlawful Internet Gaming Enforcement Act, that they sneak it through on us. They bury it in some other bill, and it passes in the middle of the night. That could always happen to us too, but it's unlikely that we'll see anything in the next 3 to 5 years.
Well, also the leagues have deep pockets to buy congressmen, but the bookmakers are going to have deep pockets as well. So I think it'll be a question of who wants to shovel more money to congressmen to get the law they want.
Yeah, this is Anthony. I just don't think. I think Congress says you take it. It's one of those things. It's like you take it. We don't want it. We don't want to deal with this. It's kind of you're damned if you do, damned if you don't situation for those guys. And I agree with Captain Jack's timetable all the way. I think that we're looking at a 3 to 4 year window before we see anything, and nothing's going to be really big until one of the big guys comes in. Pennsylvania could be called a big guy, but for the reasons brought up here, taxation and all, it's going to be a hard sell there. California, New York, Texas. These are going to be when one of these guys comes in. That's when you're going to see the fireworks, and it's going to be funky in a place like California where you've got all these different factions arguing about who's going to get it. The Indians are saying it's ours and ours alone, based on our contacts. The card rooms are going baloney. We want to be involved. The lottery commission saying we want to do it. And then you've got private enterprise also wanting to get a piece of it. So we're going to see a lot of years of legal wrangling and infighting on this, I believe.
Plus, this particular Congress has not been able to agree on much of anything in terms of getting bills passed. So that's always going to be a factor as well.
All right. What are we missing? Anything else we need to talk about?
There's going to be an interesting development. Anthony kind of alluded to it. The Indian tribes could come through here and be in the best position of anybody. Because they're in a lot of states where, based on the the National Indian Gaming Act, they are allowed to have something better than the other casinos in the area have in order for the states to levy a tax on them. So, in states like Florida, for instance, that has gone back and forth with the Seminole tribe over their compact for the past 3 or 4 years, sports betting could be the thing that the Seminoles come in and say, okay, we'll let you finally put, I think they've been arguing over having blackjack in the racinos. We'll let you finally put blackjack in the racinos if we can have sports betting. And we're going to see that in a lot of different states. And the thing with a lot of these different states is these legislatures are kind of wacky, and I didn't realize it until I started digging into all these different states. For instance, Texas only meets for 140 days every 2 years, their state legislature. So, there's no chance anything happens in Texas for a while because they're not even going to meet for a while. Most states take the summer off. So we're going to see a lot of these bills that are kind of ramping up right now, and all the press and publicity over these new sports betting bills, and then it's just going to die over the summer because the state legislatures are just not meeting. It's going to be the NFL season this year. That's the real turning point. If Atlantic City starts putting out press releases saying, we're packed all fall season long, on the weekends, Atlantic City's jumping because everyone's down here betting on the NFL, other states are going to take quick notice. The NFL is disproportionately more betting revenue than any other sport, and the states that can get in by the time the NFL season starts for 2018-19 are going to have a huge edge, and I think we're going to see a lot of states jump on board as they start to see the gaming revenue numbers come in over the NFL season.
Yeah, this is Anthony, and I want to make a point here because I'm listening to this. This is probably the first sports betting show I've ever been on with Frank where I've done way more talking. I mean, every time he and I are on a show, I'm the one sitting in the corner, and he's doing all the talking, and he's the one everyone wants to hear. But this just proves, it shows where we stand with this whole thing. Like I said earlier, nobody knows what's going to happen. And, Captain Jack and I have probably done more of the reading and watching of what's going on the political scene, and that's where everything's at right now. Like, nobody really knows how this thing's going to shake out and where the opportunities are going to be and what the end result's going to be.
Right. Well, this is Frank, and my reason for being so cautious is that it is exactly what we've been discussing for the last hour, is that the states, each individually are going to make or break this venture in each, for each one. They could kill it by overregulation, by overtaxation, by levying too many fees. I'm down in Mexico right now, and when you go, there's tons of sports books down here, but they're worthless because they are overtaxed. In Mexico, you have. Tonight I'll be watching a basketball game at a Chris Sportsbook, but I would never bet there. I'll use my online account because there is a 7% tax that they collect off of your winnings per ticket. So it's not something you can net out for the day or anything like that. You're basically laying 110 to win 93. If you bet a parlay and you think you're going to circumvent it that way, well, on a two-teamer, you're getting whatever, like plus 242. Is what it works out to. Right down the line, they're taking a big enough chunk out of it where you realistically don't have any shot. So that can happen in a number of states if they, go overboard, and to the point where guys like us will not be interested in it, and they'll still get play from the recreational guys, because if you take a look over in the UK, they charge $1.15 all day, and they line up to bet it. So. Yeah, I'm just standing back and seeing what develops, because, as Chairman pointed out near the beginning, I see a pessimistic possibility here.
Wow, it seems like everybody is pretty pessimistic, which is the opposite of what I was expecting the way this show to go. So it's been very informative.
I'm optimistic. I'm publishing books. I'm very optimistic.
Cautiously pessimistic. That's the thing. Like I'm expect the worst, and if it turns out great, that's great. But I'm not like counting all my money because it could be bad, and then I'll be far more disappointed.
Actually, I wanted to mention when we have people on the show to talk about betting sports, there are almost no good books out there about it. And you mentioned, Anthony, that you're having people write them, but the only book that people tend to mention is Wong's Sharp Sports Betting. Are there any other books that you guys recommend?
King Yao.
Yeah. Weighing the odds at sports betting, King Yao, is similar to Wong's book, Technical. Arnie Lang wrote a book. He wrote one recently that I haven't read yet, but he wrote one earlier, which is like a sports betting 101. But I've been saying for years that there are almost no good books on betting sports anywhere. And part of the reason is that it's not so black and white. It's not so rote. Like, you can teach a guy to play blackjack pretty easily. It's step 1, step 2, step 3. But teaching people all the nuances of betting sports is much more complicated. Me personally, I've been doing it a long time, and my best strategy is affiliating with guys who really know how to do it. I think it's something you've really got to. You can't learn it by reading a book or a blueprint. There's a lot of nuance to it. The guys that I've got writing, they are all writing on specific things, and I think we might be able to crack the code a little bit to a certain degree, but to become really great at it, you're going to have to be a practitioner who has, years of experience of doing it.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think there's a lot more art than science to being a successful sports bettor. You need to kind of know where to look and how to look, and then you just constantly got to keep on your toes to find opportunities. One other book that I've always recommended is Conquering Risk by Elihu Fustel. That's a very good book. It's a little more advanced. It's definitely not the first book you want to read, but it's a good complement to Wong's book and King Yao's book as well.
All right. Well, great. I want to thank everybody. This has been a very informative show. Didn't go the way I was expecting, and that's a good thing because then I learned something. So thank you all. And Bob, do you have anything else to add?
Yes, I want everybody to go out and hit lots of royal flushes. Thanks a lot, everybody. We'll see you next week.